Hey folks, today I am back with what I think may be the last of my excerpts from the Milton Glaser lecture, What I Have Learned. For those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, this is a lecture that the graphic designer and artist Milton Glaser gave to the American Institute of Graphic Arts back in 2002. And there were 10 bullet points of wisdom in there that he wanted to share. And I found something of great interest in each one of them to me as a science fiction and fantasy author, but I wanted to do videos about what to me were the most important ones of the bunch. And today I'm going to talk about the last one in the list. It is tell the truth. And a big part of why I wanted to excerpt this one in particular is because it contains a wonderful anecdote that I think has so much of what he wants to say by way of example. I went to Las Vegas for the last AIGA convention. Someone once claimed that Vegas was the greatest single work of art the human species has yet produced. I was staying in a hotel called the Venetian, which had more clouds painted on the ceilings of the hallways than had ever been executed in 15th century Venice. I went up to the reception desk and I said, "I understand there is a Grand Canal here." And she said, "Yes, we have one here." I said, "Where is it?" She said, "One flight up." What a concept. The earth reeled beneath my feet when I thought about it. I took the stairs up, and there indeed was the Grand Canal, with gondolas and gondoliers who will cheerfully take you to St. Marco Plaza, which was just around the corner in perpetual twilight. If you sit in the plaza, even though it is under a plaster ceiling, the waiter will ask you, "Would you like to sit inside or outside?" One day the plumbing broke down, and a ghastly smell started to fill the game rooms. Actually, it was very much like Venice in the summertime. I wondered if they might be doing this intentionally. Is there such a thing as a virtual smell? I never found out, but on the way back, I took a flight that I thought might have been influenced by its proximity to Las Vegas. When I got on board, a stewardess came from the back of the cabin carrying steaming towels. I had never seen towels steaming that much. They were billowing. I realized, as she approached, that the steam wasn't coming from the towels. The source was a wine glass she was balancing on her tray. "What's in the glass?" I inquired. "Dry ice," she replied. "Is that for the drama?" I asked. She said yes. So I tried to imagine the meaning of all this and where the decision to do it was made. In the boardroom? The advertising agency? Or perhaps on the flight? Who benefits, I wondered. Could the thinking be that if the glass were steaming enough, people would remember, and next time they book a flight, they'd want to go with an airline that had steaming towels? Because if they paid attention to hot towels, they might also be attentive to whether the plane was going to land or not. How about the man in the last aisle who put a steaming towel on his face that was ice cold and immediately thought that he'd had a stroke? I don't know exactly why this bothered me, but it did. One must start with the presumption that telling the truth is important for human survival. But at this moment of relativism and virtuality, and he wrote this in 2002, by the way, I'm not sure how many would agree on what truth is or how important it is in our private and professional lives. But we must begin somewhere. Everyone who tells stories has to have at least some concern for what truth really is, because you can't tell a story that really digs itself into the reader, that really plants itself in the reader and becomes significant to the reader without it being grounded in some kind of truth. And it's very easy to say to ourselves, well, I don't have to be 100% true. I can simply be inventive as a way of substituting for the truth. And to a degree, you can get away with this. I've seen a lot of good science fiction, a lot of great fantasy that are not necessarily truthful about the human situation, but are, I don't know about this either. So I think the biggest way that this relates back to writing science fiction and fantasy is how our own You see, I think one of the things that writers have to wrestle with is, on the one hand, they're making it all up. We're inventing a story. We're inventing truth and dispensing it as we see fit. On the other hand, there has to be some element of truth to dispense with in the first place. There has to be something in our story that is grounded in things that people will nod at and say, yes, I believe in that. And so there's this temptation, especially with science fiction and fantasy, to just make it all up and to use hand-waving gestures towards the invention as a way to absolve ourselves of the responsibility of talking about the way things really are and connecting that back to the stories that we write. Here's a more concrete example. I was once talking with a friend of mine about a fantasy science fictionist kind of story that they're working on. And there were aspects of the universe where things seemed to be contrived, to put it bluntly, that they did not line up in ways that seemed to relate to human behavior. And when I asked about that, they said, well, that's because of this, this, and this in the setting. And the more I dug into this, the more I realized that the setting had been put together in such a way as to absolve or excuse a lot of the things that happened in the story that otherwise wouldn't make sense. And I said, it seems to me that you've got this the other way around. If we approach a story like this, and every time we run into something that just seems like a blatant contradiction of what we know about human behavior, and then it's explained away by saying, but this is the way things are in that world, after all, it begins to feel like a bit of a cheat. So it's probably better to start from the other approach, which is to start with the way people are behaving, and to see the ways, start with the way that people behave in the world that we know, and then to see how those kinds of behaviors might be distorted or molded or constrained or transformed by the way their world works, and to see that process, to see how those changes are made, instead of just waving your hands and saying, well, it's this way in my world because of that. So when we're talking about telling the truth, we want to start from the assumption that it's useful to look at the way people as we know them are, and build outwards from there towards the fantastic elements that we have. Because if we start with stuff that is exclusively fantastic and exclusively invented, then the burden is on us to try 2 times as hard, 4 times as hard to make all of that work. All of those wonderfully executed ceilings with the clouds painted on them begin to look a little bit shabby, and the paint starts to peel away the more we stare at it, and then eventually the plumbing breaks down, and there's the smell of sewage everywhere. So it helps to start with the truth that we all know, that we're all familiar with here in this world, and build outwards from there to the fantastic. There has to be a bridge between the two somewhere. Otherwise, if you start off in a space of complete invention, the burden is on you to try so much harder, and it's so much more difficult to produce something that has, I think, real value there. I mean, it's superficially entertaining, but I don't think it would survive more than 1 reading if you did that. It might not even survive the first reading. So that, for me, was my takeaway for bullet point 10, Tell the Truth, from the Milton Glaser lecture series. I don't know if I'm going to do any more videos on this particular series, because a lot of the other points that are discussed in there are still good, but I don't think they have as much relevance to the discussion that I have going on here. But if I do find relevance there, I will talk about it in the future. But until then, see you next time.